Hey guys, welcome to Spaghetti and Barbells, episode 8. My name's Salvatore.
Hey, my name is Luca.
And our 4 topics today are, Luca.
So topic number 1 is the anabolic window of opportunity, or the post training nutrition. How can we make the most out of it? Topic number 2 is going to be how to train around injuries. Topic number 3 is going to be how to pick for a sport event. And the topic number 4 is how and when to use deload in training.
Let's do this. Topic number 1 is the anabolic window. Now, guys, there's a lot of myths about this in the fitness industry that you must eat straight after you train. Like, you must grab a protein shake, and if you don't, you're going to lose all your gains. Now, that's all been debunked, right? Luca knows a lot about this, so I'll let him take the reins, and he'll explain the research behind this.
Yeah, the anabolic window is the concept that we are more sensitive to nutrients after training. In the past, we used to say that you need to eat immediately after training, meaning that within 20 to 30 minutes post-training, you want to have your shake with your whey protein and your dextrose and all your high glycemic index carbs. Nowadays, research proves that that's not necessarily the case, meaning that you still have more efficiency in storing your nutrients post-training, but the window is much longer than what we used to believe. For novice or for somebody new to training, it seems to be quite long, 48 to 72 hours, meaning that post-training you're going to have these 2 to 3 days that you're going to be more efficient in storing your glycogen and in increasing your muscle protein synthesis. If you're an advanced athlete, it's probably a little bit shorter. This seems to be around 24 hours. So it's still relevant, meaning that we still want to make sure to have quality food, good amount of protein, good amount of carbohydrates, post-training, but it doesn't have to be immediately after training. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily have to be a fast source of protein and carbohydrates. So one of the main advantage of whey protein is they are much faster to go into your system than meat, fish, eggs, and so on. So that seems to be an advantage from if you believe that the anabolic window is very short. But knowing that the anabolic window is much longer, it doesn't have to be whey protein. It could be whey protein, but it could also be some sort of protein source that is not as fast.
Yeah.
So if you decide to have meat, fish, eggs, as we say, they're still very valid source of protein. It doesn't seem to be a big issue to have them post-training because your sensitivity is going to be longer than what we thought. You can still use protein. I personally like to have, if I use protein powder, I like to have a blend with different type of protein to have different speed of assimilation. So a combination of fast and slow releasing protein, I think is ideal. But at the same time, I tend to use more like solid food. So for me, I go more with my tuna, my steak, my eggs, and so on. But that's just a personal preference. But regardless, there is a rationale behind be very mindful of your food choices. But yes, it doesn't have to be in your post-workout shake. It could be in your lunch, afternoon snack, and dinner after your 11 a.m. training, if that's the time that you normally train at.
Me, I physically like to eat food. I like the physical food.
Yeah, same.
I stay away from shakes, so I'm with Luca on that. And another note, guys, is that this brings us onto the topic about intermittent fasting. Now, intermittent fasting we've spoken about before is just a hack in order to reduce calories to lose weight. Now, it's actually detrimental to you and to your potential muscle growth that you could obtain from training if you're training 4 to 5 times a week and you're intermittent fasting and you're not meeting that anabolic window because you're missing it because you're doing fast longer than 16 hours. So me and Luca were speaking about this before. You're actually doing a disservice to muscle growth. So I have a client who fasts regularly. And I've noticed a decline in his energy levels. And I've told him time and time after again to not fast because he's now training 4 to 5 times a week. He needs to be eating 3 to 4 meals a day consistently because that anabolic window is very short, like Luca was saying. As you become an experienced athlete, your anabolic window is shorter. So you need to eat more consistently. So that's what we were speaking about off camera about fasting. It is a good idea if you're trying to do fasting, maybe to obviously reduce your calories and control your calorie intake. But what would you recommend, Luca? 12-hour fast max?
If you look into paper that look into these sort of topics, It seems that 16 hours is the maximum.
Yeah.
I still think that if you do less than that, is better.
Yeah.
But you could potentially get away with a 16-hour fasting without affecting muscle protein breakdown as much. I prefer to go with less than that. It depends on the goal of the client as well. If your goal is fat loss, having a shorter window is advantageous because you have less time to eat. So makes sense. If your goal is muscle building and my window is very small, it's very hard to have my calories in that very small window. So I think it's very much dependent on your goal, whether it's muscle gain or fat loss. For muscle gain, I don't think there is much practical application. I just feel you make your life harder, if anything.
Yeah.
For fat loss, it will make your life easier, but at the same time, the cost is that you're going to be more prone to muscle loss.
Yep.
So yes, definitely no more than 16 hours. I would say probably less than that, in my opinion. But yeah, and you want to have a consistent amount of protein coming over through your diet. With carbs and fat, we know that we can store them as glycogen or as triglycerides. Protein can't be stored, so that's why you need to provide them through food. If you have predominantly solid food, as we discussed before, the release of protein is a little bit slower, so you can get away with the longer gaps in between.
Yeah.
So if you have a steak, you can probably say that you have a consistent amount of protein in your system for the following 4 to 5 hours, maybe a little bit longer. If you have whey protein, maybe it's going to be more like a 1 to 2 hours. So having more solid food is going to cover you up for longer, which is positive. But yes, I would probably avoid using intermittent fasting, having huge gap without food if your goal is preserving muscle mass or muscle growth. Absolutely.
Anabolic window.
There we go.
Topic 2 is how to train around injuries and should you stop training if an injury occurs? And the answer is no. Look, I did a post about this, which this is going to be next week. This is going to go live, so my post already came out because whatever. Anyways, I've done a post on it. Practically, injuries can do a lot of things. So injuries can show you weaknesses that you must work on, and can show you that your foundation is flawed. So you don't have a strong enough foundation, and you need to build a stronger foundation. Number 2, injuries can also occur because the stronger you get, right? Again, more things are going to become apparent. Okay, so like the stronger you get, things might, like, for example, let's just make it nice and simple. Say you're squatting, you start off 100 kilos, but you work all the way up to about 150 kilos. And then you notice that you've got imbalances in your hip and your ankles and all that. Injuries will occur because your body is just responding to a stimulus that you're trying to, you're pushing your body beyond a point, and your body's gone, I can't do this. So then you need to then do variations of that squat to get stronger in that position to make you better so you can keep progressing. So that's what number 2 can be. Injuries can do that. Third one is, if an injury does occur, do you stop training? The simple answer, again, is no. You continue training. You just got to regress the movement pattern. So you hurt your back and you can't squat, you box squat, right? You can't do deadlifts, well, you do reverse hypers. Like, you've got to keep moving in that plane of motion. Keep the muscle groups that you were once training still active, because if you don't, you will lose your progression over time, and it's just not worth it. Plain and simple. And what do you think, Luca? Would you say otherwise, or?
No, I think that is important to, injuries is a very broad word to use, meaning that you can have an injury because there is some sort of underlying issue that was meant to be addressed to start with. So the question is why we got hurt during our squat is because our ankle mobility is not the best.
Yeah.
It's because our technique is not as it should be.
Yeah.
It's because we have some sort of tightness in our hip flexors. Yeah. So I think if we are talking about an injury that is due to some sort of technical mistakes or muscle imbalance, is our opportunity to address what is wrong and to come back stronger. So that's something. So yeah, it depends on the kind of injuries, and I still think that depends what the injury is. So if I hurt my shoulder, clearly I can still do my lower body. I still have a lot of option in terms of leg pressing, lunges, Bulgarian squat, potentially safety bar squats. Yeah. So it depends on the kind of injury that you have. So I would say it's very important to keep training with whatever is not affected by the injury to maintain muscle mass, to maintain training morale, to be motivated to come back to train later on and so on.
Because how many times have you got a client that's injured themselves and they think just to stop cold turkey?
Yeah, so it's obviously not very productive.
It's not the answer. And like you just said, if you injure your shoulder, like Luca was saying, you can still train your lower body.
Just.
And if you injure your right shoulder, you still can train your left arm.
Yeah, of course.
You can still do single arm bench press, single arm rows. Like, it's so annoying, and you've probably experienced this multiple times, and I have too, is that people automatically, well, one, stop training because they were injured, or two, they'll go to the doctors, and the doctor will tell them to stop training, which is the wrong advice.
I think most of the physio that I personally work with tend to be a little bit more pro training.
Oh, all physios are. It's doctors that tell you to stop training.
Yeah, but I think that nowadays things are changing a little bit. So I think a lot of rehabilitation professionals start to see the value of training in speed up the recovery process.
Yeah.
And I really believe that not training and resting actually make the recovery process much slower.
Yeah.
Training seems to have a positive effect in the healing speed. Is probably because by moving more, by being more active, we have more blood and we have more nutrients go toward the affected area.
Yeah.
So it seems that there is definitely a positive in being active regardless of the injuries.
Yeah.
However, if our connective tissue is not fully repaired, do an exercise that is going to create more damage is not going to be a good idea. So it really depends on the injury that we have. It depends on the kind of exercise we use. You can even use a different variation. Something that is quite common with my clients to have, for example, low back issues. Maybe squats at this stage is not the best option, but what they could do is they can do a hack squat machine that allow them to be very upright.
Yep.
And there is not as much toe force that you would have with a Romanian deadlift or
100%.
with a squats or with a traditional deadlift. So hack squat, pendulum squat, leg presses, lunges, these are all options to work around low back injuries.
Reverse hyper.
Reverse hyper as well. So there are a lot
It was
of...
invented by...
Simons from Westside Barbell.
Correct.
There we go.
And he invented that because he bulged 2 discs in his back. So he injured himself and wanted to still train hamstrings, glutes, or the whole posterior chain. Yep. So he invented the reverse hyper, which is a fantastic piece of equipment. But yeah, like Luca was saying, like you can still train everything. You just need to regress the movement pattern back.
I think that is for me as a trainer, I didn't get hurt 20 times, touch wood, but I feel that every time that I have some sort of niggling or something that was not ideal, I learned something more. So I learned that not warming up properly was probably not a good idea. So I pay more attention on my mobility work, on my activation work. Or I learned that these particular bench press variations seem to be more stressed than what I can handle on my elbows. So you start to learn how to change little things around, whatever is your elbow position, whatever is keeping your leg tight, whatever is improve your ankle mobility before going for a deep squat, or whatever it is that is the reason why or one of the reasons why you got hurt in the very first place. So I think injuries can make you smarter in your approach to training, which is positive. We don't want to be in pain, obviously. I think also something that we want to be aware of is using painkillers. I don't think is bad, but it will hide something that your body's trying to tell you.
Correct.
Meaning that if I take a huge amount of painkillers to go through my bench press when my shoulder is hurting, means that I don't feel any pain when I do my bench, but potentially I'm going to create more and more damage on my shoulder.
100%.
So the painkillers has its role. So I believe that you can use it if it affects you to the point that you can't go through your physical activities, but you don't want to also hide what's going on in your body because you can create further damage if you keep pushing yourself regardless of the injury. Yeah. So that's something that you really want to be mindful of.
So it's easy as this, guys. If you are injured, speak to your trainer or speak to your coach. Find variations to your lift so that you can still progress. 2, if you are getting consistently niggles and pain when doing something, like Luca was saying, it could just be as simple as that your technique's wrong. You know what I mean? Or the third thing is your foundation's just not strong enough.
Yeah.
So your strength foundation. So instead of just keep adding on weight and squatting, and you just keep getting higher and higher, and you're going past parallel and you're quarter squatting, maybe take the weights off. Start at a weight and at a relatively good RPE that you can manage, and go get good depth in the squat. For giving squats an example here, guys. Using the squat as an example, just squat all the way down past parallel and just work on your depth and get better in that position.
I think so. Everyone is different. So your propensity to have a particular type of injury could be very different from mine. Maybe you have a propensity to get hurt on your low back, and maybe for me it's my knee. So everyone is going to be different. I found that with some clients, for whatever reason, they're very vulnerable on the low back area. So I don't give them as many exercises on the low back. So with them, if I do legs twice per week, which typically I do, is not going to be Romanian deadlift twice. It could be one session is Romanian deadlift and
Yeah.
squat. The other session could be leg press and hack squat. So I use maybe one session to with exercise that don't involve the low back as much, if that's one area that seems to give them trouble, and if it seems that they keep having the same problem over and over again. So you want to keep in account their injury history and the client, like sometimes clients, they tend to have a lot of issue in one particular area and they can't handle as much stress that I would be able to handle.
Yeah.
So it depends. Okay, topic number 3 is going to be peak week. So what is a peak week and how can we set up for success? Peak week means that we are going to use a different type of strategy in order to be at our best for a particular sport event.
Yep.
Powerlifting, as Sal was mentioning earlier on, is one sport that requires you to perform your best lift for one repetition on squat, bench, and deadlift. So being able to show up at your powerlifting event and express the highest level of force that you can possibly do is our goal with a peak week. However, this concept is applicable to most of the performance-based sports. We know that if, for example, I'm a soccer player and I completely destroy my legs with squats the night before a match, it's probably not going to be ideal.
No.
So the idea is what can we do to maintain the adaptation that we go through training, but don't be so under recover from training that we are not able to express her in the field. So there are different strategies that we can use for a peak week. The most common one is reducing volume. We know that the volume is what creates a lot of fatigue.
Yeah.
And when I say volume, I'm talking about set time reps, meaning that if I do 3 sets of 10 on a squat, my volume in terms of my training volume is 3 repetitions.
Yeah.
So the most simple and one of the most effective strategy to have a peak week is to decrease the amount of work you do, but at the same time maintain the amount of weight that you're lifting.
Yeah.
The most common way to prepare for a peak week is deloading like a 40 to 60% of your volume. So if I do 4 sets of 8, I typically do 2 sets of 8. If I do 5 sets of 5, typically it's 2 sets of 5. So it's typically around 50% less volume. And typically we tend to maintain the amount of weight we use. It doesn't seem that the weight itself affects fatigue. It does, but it's more volume that it seems to have a negative impact on performance. However, if we need to experiment with different strategies. If we have an athlete that we decrease the volume by 50%, he still doesn't seem to be able to perform on the powerlifting platform, okay, maybe we can experiment with the load as well. So you could experiment with minus 20, minus 30% of load and leading up to the show just to maintain technique, but without getting fatigue. But it's like the bottom line when you do any type of peak week is decreasing the amount of stress you put to your body, maintaining the adaptation you got through your previous 16 weeks of training or whatever it is that you did on the off season, and make sure that you perform your best on the platform.
And a lot of problems that I see with a lot of powerlifters is, and questions I get asked is, so I'll give it nice and simple for people that don't understand or haven't done powerlifting, so you can understand it. Is just say, for example, it's a 4-week block leading up to a competition, and the 4th week is your peak week. Generally speaking, in that block, your accessories will drop week by week.
Yep.
Eventually, on that last week, which what Luca was speaking about, that peak week, your main focus is the main lifts. So you'll be doing heavy singles and practically minimal accessories, because by that time you're a week out from comp. And it's not doing more accessories is not going to benefit you.
No, you just try to dissipate fatigue.
It's too late right now. Like you've done everything you can. So your main focus is trying to get the most out of your lifts. So everything will be a single. And what I see a lot of powerlifters do wrong is that the peak week they go to failure, which is not what you want.
Yeah.
You want to go, say, 90% of what you believe is your 1RM, because you don't know yet because you're going to comp. You can base it off your previous 1RMs, and you could probably lift a little bit heavier. But what I would suggest is don't do so, because if you are trying to do your 1RMs on your peak week, it could be detrimental and it could backfire, and you can miss lifts, and that's not what you want. So you still work off your previous 1RMs, because believe it or not, the following week, which is your taper week, will be a kind of a deload kind of it's a taper deload. So you're doing everything sub-maximal and you're just giving yourself your central nervous system time to rest. You believe it or not, when you go to the comp day, you'll be actually lifting more than what your 1RM is.
If you do things properly.
If you do things properly. So as a powerlifter, the advice I'd give you is on your final peak week, don't go stupid Stick to the plan. Stick to basing it off your original 1RM. Okay. Don't try to go heavier, because I've seen it so many times happen, and just lifters just failing, and it's just not worth it. You just lose out when it comes to comp. Okay, and then the following week you get angry because you've missed, and then the taper week goes down the drain, deload goes down the drain. You get the comp, you know, all the emotions start playing with you, and then you just screw comp up. So don't do that. You want to have a really, really good final block before comp, and just make sure your peak is really, really good.
Yeah, it's also like injury prevention, meaning that if I do my true 1RM, the chances of injury are higher, because by definition, the closer I go to failure, the more my technique is likely going to break down.
Yeah.
So getting like a low back injuries 3 days before your meeting
very
probably is
common.
not going to be ideal.
Yeah.
Morale as well. If I want to go to my competition or my show confident, if I just miss out the squat that I meant to do 2 days later, I'm probably not going to be in the best mindset to perform. So confidence is quite important when it's time to perform at your best. You want to go there feeling strong, feeling that you don't have any niggling and so on. So I think that it's important that you go there don't lift as heavy as you could, simply because if you feel that your last squat was quite smooth, you will feel that you got this 200 kg squat or whatever you're trying to perform on the day. Absolutely.
And if you got more energy and you got more in the tank, and you feel like you want to do more accessories after you finish your main lifts on taper week, please just don't do it. Keep that energy, store it. Keep that motivation and use it for the following week. Again, I've seen a lot of lifters go, well, I've got heaps of energy, I'm going to do a crap load of accessories. It's not worth it. It's honestly just not worth it. Just save it, wait for comp, because believe it or not, you'll do very well if you do so. So since we were speaking about peak phase before a competition, let's talk about deload, which comes straight after a peak week, or taper deload. So deloads, when do you use them, guys? Well, this is a very overused thing. I feel like a lot of people deload when they don't necessarily need to. Yeah. If you're a newbie to training and you just started and you've never lifted weights ever before, generally speaking, you do not need a deload. Okay, because you're new to training and your central nervous system hasn't got a massive hit, and it's never experienced lifting and all that. So I wouldn't necessarily use a deload or implement a deload for someone that's just started training until maybe, what do you reckon, Luca, 8 months down the track?
Yeah, at least.
Yeah. But if you're an experienced lifter, deloads are vital. And the reason being for this, and if you aren't using them, you are doing a disservice to your potential growth in whatever given sport that you've chosen, or in terms of muscle growth in general. In that, if you just keep training at a high intensity, at 100% every single week, what eventually is going to happen is you're going to get injured or you're going to get sick. It's the body's response because you are not deloading. You're not giving the body time to recover, take a step back, and then just obtain muscle growth, and then go again. So if you had to draw it on a graph, a deload would look like this. You're going up, you drop a little bit, that's your deload. Then you go up again, you're still higher, drop a little bit, and then you go up. Now, implementing those deloads can vary depending on your programming. If you're a powerlifter, it's generally after a 4-week block of training. In general hypertrophy, it's 6 to 12 weeks.
Yeah, something like that.
Right? So you must use deloads if you're an experienced lifter, because if you're not using them, you're literally either going to get, like I just said, sick or injured, and it's just not worth it. You're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to do anything, like do your body any better. Having a week where you lower the intensity, and it can either be in reps, sets, that can be reduced, or even weight. Okay, that's what a deload can be. Less sets, less reps, or less weight. Out of those three, that's what can generally happen in a deload, and it gives your body time to recover. And you're generally working at around about 6 or 7 RPE.
Yeah,
you're not going too intense. No. But how would you see? Like, I've seen that in powerlifting. It's done after a 4-week block. Now in hypertrophy training, what do you see, and what are the side effects you've seen with people not deloading?
Yeah, I think it's very dependent on the person you work with.
Yeah.
When I work with general pop, I don't prescribe any deload at all.
Yeah, of course.
But when I talk about general pop, they probably don't train more than 2-3 times per week.
100%.
If you train 3 days per week, it's like, I don't know if there is a need to
There's not enough intensity.
Yeah, and on top of that, the general population typically don't have as priority training. They could have as priority their career or their family.
Yeah, which is fair.
So if you're going to have 1 week off because you're in holidays, and then 3 weeks later you're going to be at the meeting for your son school or whatever it is, you're going to have your deload unplanned because you're not prioritizing your training. So I would say for general pop, due to the fact that they tend to skip session for whatever reason anyway, I don't prescribe them at all. If I have a client that train quite seriously, and I do have, I track people like that as well. It depends on their experience level. If they are really new to training, I still think that the deload is not going to be as frequent as with an advanced lifter.
Yeah.
Meaning that even if they generally work hard and they have high volume and they push themselves every time, their capacity to truly express how strong they are is limited compared to somebody that is advanced.
Yeah.
So they, even if they push themselves, they are not going to lift as much as they could. So the amount of stress they put their body is going to be limited. If I have somebody advanced, so I would say after probably 8-10 months of training and consistency with training, of course, that's something that start to be more useful.
More consistent, yeah.
Something that I would like to add is deload is something we use to don't overtrain, to don't go to a point that we are not able to recover.
Correct.
My main point is I would like to address what we can do to improve recovery before sliding in a recovery.
That's
You know what I mean? So I would say, are you sleeping your 7 to 8 hours per night? Are you getting enough calories? Do you have enough protein? Are you setting up your training correctly? So these are all questions that you want to ask. Even weekends, if you get smashed every weekend with alcohol, maybe addressing your lifestyle or addressing your lack of sleep is going to improve your recovery without necessarily doing a deload week. So there are a lot of factors that we want to keep in account. Some of the variables that affect our recovery are not under our control. So our age is something that we can't control. Our genetics is not under our control. So if I'm older and my genetics is not the best, I will assume that my recovery ability is not the same as when I was 10 years younger.
Yeah.
So this is something that is out of your control, so there is no point to be worried about this. We take into account these factors, but we can't do much about it. But sleeping, diet, training strategies are all variables that we want to look into before prescribing a deload week. Assuming that everything is on check, I would say deload start to be relevant because we don't want to go to a point that we are more likely to have injuries or a point that we don't have any more progression. So the general rule of thumb is, I would say, at the very least 6 for bodybuilders. You can bring it up to 12 weeks. You want to have 1 week where you deload your volume or your intensity or combination of both. However, let's say that I'm on week number 9 and I'm still keep getting stronger. I would probably keep the cycle a little bit longer. So I could use a deload reactively when I see things slowing down.
Yeah.
Or I could have a pre-decided deload that I use every 8 weeks. So you can use either. For me personally, when I'm 8 weeks, even if I feel that I'm still progressing, I tend to still slide in because I feel that I'm more subject to little niggling on my elbows or little throw in my back. So I feel that things are going down the hill. So I
It's
just
a bit
put it there.
easier to go by feel in bodybuilding.
Yeah,
With
absolutely.
powerlifting, on the other hand, it's generally 4 weeks because the reason being is
You lift heavier.
you lift heavier.
Yeah.
And on the 4th week, it's generally close to a 9 RPE.
Yeah.
And by the 5th week, you won't be able to go by... You'll be cooked.
Correct.
Your central nervous system. So with bodybuilding, it can be by feel.
It can because you don't use the same level of intensity. So by definition, when you train for strength, the load are going to be heavy. So the amount of stress you put to your elbows, knees, ankles, low back is much higher because you typically do set of 8 or less. But if you do bodybuilding, you can do set of 15, you can do set of 20. So the amount of stress to my body is not the same.
No.
So you could get away with a longer period of time without decreasing the load because my joints and my system is not going to be under as much stress.
Correct.
But there is still a need for a deload if I'm not recovering, if I look after all the variables that I could to prevent overtraining.
And one more thing to mention, guys, on a deload week is you want to actually get as much rest as you possibly can. So you want to eat more, you want to sleep better, you want to make sure, go to the physio, do your recoveries, make sure that week is literally a week to give your body a complete and utter rest. Other than that, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. For more content or more advice, just head over to our Instagram pages. You can check out Luca's, check out mine. If you want some training, we both do online coaching. But other than that, guys, I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll see you on another episode of Spaghetti and Barbells.
See you soon.